group. I dropped the manual in the group. We'll look at ways to incentivize and encourage farmers to return forest to their fields. Agroforestry is what it's called. And because our farmers here believe that if the farm has a lot of trees, the trees will shade the crops and the crops won't do well. And so they move down the trees and the fields are left bare. And then those trees, who are supposed to produce the oxygen and take off the excess CO2 are not there. And so we've been faced with a lot of heat and other consequential effects. So we'll look at that. Well, so this planting technique is ideal for northern Nigeria because those furrows will contain just the precise amount of nutrient we need. If we decide to use cow dung, it's there. Rains won't wash it off because, you make the precise furrow. These planting techniques provide several benefits. No till is encouraged. The precise fertilizer amount can be used per hole. We'll look at that in micro dosing. A conventional farming technique when the farmers go, the broadcast fertilizer. Some farmers have observed will spread the fertilizer evenly on, like we have on this picture on a straight line, and then they weed. As they are weeding, the activities of the hole is covering the fertilizer back into the soil. Because if fertilizer is left exposed, the efficiency is greatly reduced. There will be air erosion. The wind will move some of these moistures. Some of the fertilizer particles are so light. Wind can blow them off or remove them from where you need them to a different place. Or when there's rain, flash floods, you can wash these fertilizers off to the river. I give farmers very key example when it comes to fertilizer application. If you're a farmer, you need to study the topography of your field. Because if I'm farming on a hill and I have a neighbor whose field is in a valley, every time I apply my fertilizer, if I'm not sensitive to know the right time to apply, whenever I apply, maybe say today, and it rains in the evening or tomorrow, my co-farmer in the valley will be enjoying my fertilizer. As a matter of fact, the farmer will be smiling and jumping around and say, hey, God has blessed me. This year I did not even use any fertilizer. My field did excellently well. It's someone else's sweat just because the farmer did not make the right decision at the right time. So time of planting, time of application of inputs varies, they matter. And this is beyond fertilizer, even insecticides, even herbicides. If you apply herbicides immediately and you didn't take cognizance of the fact that the wet clouds are heavy, that we can see you don't need any equipment to tell you it's about to rain. If you're in the field and the clouds are gathering, you should be able to say, oh, I have to hold on my application today. These are some key little informations we need to teach farmers. So you observe the weather. That's why it's best to apply your herbicides or insecticides at best early hours of the morning or late in the evenings. You should be able to tell the ground is moist, has moisture, the crops have moisture, effects are and impacts are immediate and resourceful. Then you go the heat of the sun, apply it, and you're tired, you leave the field only for rain to fall. And then your herbicides are washed off into the river and you have to spend more money to buy. So microdosing is encouraged here. We look at microdosing as we go on. Farmers should be encouraged to take soil sampling tests. As we continue this training and as we involve the practical aspect, teach us how to use simple soil sampling kits, which is very key. In Nigeria, we have a habit, just how we walk to pharmacy to buy drugs to treat whatever we perceive we're going through. Oh, I have a headache, it must be malaria. You walk to a pharmacy and buy anti-malaria, whichever type, and then you treat it. And unknown to you, it's not malaria, it's typhoid. And all kind of resistance come up. Same things we do in our fields as farmers. We need to know this and teach them. We need to know this and in a practical way demonstrate it. It's a key thing. It's not rocket science. It's not very complex. There's very simple soil pH test kits. Some of them are just test strips papers, like a pregnancy test strip. If you've seen it, first color change will tell you your soil is acidic. You make the right decision. Some of them are very simple gadgets, like our phones. We just dissolve the soil in water in a container and we can run the pH test and we can tell, oh, your soil is acidic, sir. Your soil lacks nitrogen, but it has a lot of sulfur and other things. We just need to buy only urea this year. We don't need super. We don't need SSP and the rest. You can make the right judgment calls. So we look at these things. Simple soil pH test kits we can use as climate smart agronomists in the field agents teaching farmer. Simple soil nutrient analyzers that we can use and interpret them in very simple ways. Or simple ways we can collect soil samples. For a little or no token, farmers can get detailed soil analysis, and they can make the right judgment calls. So it's important as field agents, as agronomists, we know that soil test is very key. Soil test is very key, at least beginning of farm season every year. Every farmer should have an idea, of his nutrient cycle. You farmed so much maize for the past 3 years, definitely the maize would have reduced the micronutrients, would have reduced your nitrogen content. But because of the organic waste, because of the richness of the soil, the P and K is available in a rich volume, but nitrogen is lacking. Oh, there's so much nitrogen in this soil because we've been using urea year in, year out. So let's cut back on nitrogen and let's bring in micronutrients. Oh, this soil has a lot of nutrients, but you are not benefiting from it because the soil is acidic. We'll look at that. And then how do we neutralize the soil so that the soil can release the nutrients to the crops? So these informations are very key and we need to know them. So this approach creates room for water and nutrient management, which is very important. And so we continue. So an example of a no-till practice is reflected here. You realize that the grasses are there, they've been killed, but they have not been completely turned out. The entire field have not been tilled. The regions where planting will be done is the only place where it seems like there's been a straight till. It's very easy for planting of things like maize, rice, sorghum, and the like. And the region where the farmer doesn't intend to plant, he hasn't tilled it, no disturbance. The soil is properly maintained and left. So here, furrows are made for planting, best for examples of crops that we can plant like this. I mentioned sorghum, of course, the major of the cereal crops. Another important crop that is good to plant this way is sesame. Sesame. So we'll continue here. Yesterday, I dropped this picture on the group. I don't know if we have time to look at it. One of the questions Madame asked led to this. It's like she saw the future, the trainings we were going to do today. So tram line intercropping, very important and very key modern approach to intercropping. One of the key things I appreciate about this method of farming is that the farmer is able to maximize his space. He can grow the staple crops he's after. He can grow his maize and he can grow his beans, he could grow his soybeans, he could grow his groundnut, and not worry about space, not worry about competition, and essentially not worry so much about farm inputs because there's a disease pest for maize that might not enjoy the presence of beans. There's a disease pest for beans that might not enjoy the presence of maize. You see, a wise decision, a climate smart decision. Now, remember, legumes fix nitrogen in the soil. So farming this method helps you to cut down on excessive use of inputs. It's a more natural way to monocrop, but it's a little bit tweaking of the monocropping to monocrop in a very smart way that allows you to, for lack of a better way, crop in two ways in the same field. So what this farmer essentially has done is this approach to conservation agriculture seeks to establish intercropping systems. Here, competition is minimized, land resources are better utilized, 2-row tram lines of maize to 2 rows of beans. See what's happened here? There is 2 rows of maize, and then there's a row of beans. There's another row of 2 rows of maize. There's another row of beans. Harvesting is going to be easy, even for an industrial scale, because they are not mixed. Compared to the other one where you plant maize and plant beans and plant maize and plant beans, and the entire maize grows and casts a shade on the beans. So I just wanted to emphasize it here. It says here, the cereal crops enjoy nitrogen fixation. The beans enjoy shade, or the legumes enjoy shade and protection from the elements. Close spacing enables canopy cover, thereby limiting weeds. We talked exhaustively on this yesterday, that when there's canopy cover, the field is properly covered, like the word canopy. So because there is no sunlight getting to the lower weeds, photosynthetic process is limited. And so we continue with planting techniques. There is a growing demand for simple and affordable agricultural implements that are affordable to smallholder farmers, that are key and very efficient. This is one of them, the hand planter. I don't know if any of us have seen this. Hopefully we'll begin to work with farmers to make these things available. It's a very simple technology. Now, one of the things farmers battle with, as you go around the field to practice, you realize is getting farm hands to work in the farm has become very challenging. A lot of young people who are available to work in farms have either moved to urban areas or are no longer available for whatsoever reason or the other. They think they prefer menial jobs. They prefer jobs that will give them quick money. They prefer lifestyles that. So it's not as easy as it has always been to get farm hands. But if you are expecting smallholder farmers to afford, uh, if you're expecting smallholder farmers to afford tractors, industrial planters, it's not feasible. And so we need to think of technologies that are affordable, technologies that are easy to manage, technologies that are easily obtainable and that farmers can interact with. The Haraka hand planter is such technology. Essentially, it's just a wheel and a puncher. Mr. Manuel, please mute yourself. And so the Haraka hand planter is such technology. It's very easy to use and maintain. It just contains a wheel, and as you push the trolley on the wheel rotates and punch the ground. Now the blue cylinder you are seeing contains the seed. Some farmers will mix in fertilizer there as they are planting. They can microdose. Now, if you look clearly and closely on this picture, I hope it's clear on your screen as it is on mine. You will see a rope, a very straight rope. Now you'll be able to appreciate how this was achieved, how this was achieved.
Sorry, sir, to interrupt you. I want to ask something.
Okay, go ahead.
But sorry for the interruption. Sir,
Please,
regarding this equipment that you're just presenting, sir, is the equipment calibrated for maybe when during planting to give what spacing between one crop to the other?
Yes, it can be calibrated.
Okay.
I'll come to that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. So now you can understand how this was achieved on a straight line. To be able to achieve this straight line, it's done by the rope you are seeing here. If you can see my mouse on your screen, there's a straight rope here that is being set in the field before the haraka is pulled. So as the lady is pushing the haraka, she's pushing it just next to the line. And the aim is that the tire will be touching the line. And as she maintains on a straight line, she can have her maize planted on a straight line. And like you were asking, yes, this equipment can be calibrated for different planting spacing, for different plants. The calibration for sesame is different from the calibration for rice. It's different from the calibration for maize. It's different from the calibration for a farmer who wants to plant 1 kernel maize or 2 kernel maize. In different regions, this can be done. But importantly for us, it's cheap, it's affordable, it's easy to maintain, and anybody, you don't need so much training to, operate this equipment. And overall, for climate smart agriculture, you can microdose while you are planting. Microdose is just a simple word for being able to apply fertilizer. Will come to that while you are planting so that the plants can have very soft landing. You don't need to wait for the plants to suffer for 2-3 weeks before you apply your first fertilizer. As you are planting, you're also planting the fertilizer with the seeds. And so this equipment it's very important. And I'm hoping that we'll begin to work together to see how we can teach our farmers these equipment and how to use them. And so farmers can do away with waiting, because if you really look, one of the reasons why farmers plant and farm very late, it's not because they intend to. Sometimes a farmer is waiting for 2 weeks for a tractor to come and plow his field. Some farmers will wait for so long, longer than that. And until the tractor comes, he's at the mercy of the tractor operator. And if he resorts to going to engaging local hands, he or she is at the mercy of the local hands. Maybe they are busy somewhere else. Maybe there are not enough hands. The pressure at the onset of farm is more. This equipment saves you all that. It's equipment you can carry to the farm on your bike. It's equipment you can easily operate yourself, and it's very efficient. So we'll look at all these things and how we can introduce them to farmers. And it's equipment we can, train people on how to fabricate, because the main thing we need are just a few of the parts. The rest can be fabricated. It looks so simple, but it's designed. Now, this is an animal drawn planter, same Haraka planter, but this time around, because it's an animal pulling it, the container have been doubled so that the animal can do more job. And we talked about the ropes earlier. If you look at my mouse, the ropes might not be very visible, but you realize there's a straight line that the animals are pulling the line. And there's a point man there who is directing the animals. These are very key, simple technologies that our farmers can embrace. You know, we already have animal-drawn ridges, animal-drawn plowers in the north. How about attaching the planters? You know, these animals don't need diesel to run, don't need fuel to run. For smallholder farmers, I believe these are technologies that will change productivity. So animals can be also used to plant. Here, planters are attached to an animal. Furrows are made, and as the furrows are made, microdosing can be done as well as planting. You know, and you realize just the right spacing. And importantly, did you realize how rich this picture has of mulch? The grasses from the previous rice field have not been burnt. The farmer has left them. You know, if you travel the north, you realize it's done. The farmers heap these things. It's just that cows eat them all up. Look at this region where the mouse is circling. There's a heap of grass there, hay from the previous rice farm. And they've not burnt them. They have been allowed this for a reason. Now, this farm, you realize, will have less weeds growing compared to the farm that's been burnt. These are climate smart key decisions that differentiates you from the farmer who burns his field and the fire who stimulates the grasses to grow, because the seeds that are on the ground will feel threatened and immediately they'll respond by germinating. So we move to the next topic. But before we move on, does anyone have any questions on all we've taught? We'll take a few minutes to ask questions. You can go through the slides for you to see if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer them. This way, these things will stick more than when I'm just zooming through them and there's no room for questions. Please feel free to unmute and ask me any question.
Okay, sir. I want to ask one question.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, it's regarding this mulching, sir.
Okay.
Do we have some certain grasses that we can use or materials specified for this mulching, or we can use any grass that is available?
You don't really need to go look for grass to mulch your field. If, for example, you are a rice farmer, when you trash your rice, the waste remaining from the rice threshing, what do you do with it? You can decide to put it away so that by the onstart of dry season farm, you use it to mulch your field.
Thank you, sir.
Now, another thing I also like to point on, you notice there is a grass. I'm not certain of its scientific name or its not Hausa name. There's a grass that is used for building thatch in the north. This is the season where they harvest it. They bring them all the way to Abuja to sell. It's a very long grass. Maybe I'll drop a picture of it. Now, salt grasses, yes, you can go and harvest them for vegetable farmers, or you can go to rice fields to collect rice waste. But I like to also warn farmers in a bid to mulch, for example, as we locally process our rice, we don't efficiently process the seeds. So when you mulch, let's say I'm a vegetable farmer, I'm trying to grow tomatoes, and I go and bring rice hay to mulch my field. There'll be rice seeds trapped in there that will sprout in your field. You need to know this so that as they come up, you weed them, or importantly, treat those hay so that they don't bring pests, weeds, and disease to your farm. But the important thing is if they are properly dry, they are properly preserved, there will be a lot of resources for you instead of a challenge. I hope this answers you.
Oh, hello, sir.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Sir, this mulching is helped to retain the soil moisture retaining capacity and improve soil facility.
Fertility, excellent. Yes, it does.
So there is no need for burning the plant residue. Just
no.
A farmer will leave them on the farm, and when he plant his crop, he will leave the trash.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so this will help the soil, help to improve the soil fertility and soil health. Can?
Yes, it will. It will.
Oh, good, sir. Good, sir. Thank you, sir.
Now, just to also add to your contribution, if, for example, it's easier to mulch maize fields because as you plant, you can mulch. But for rice farmers who broadcast, not for rice farmers who transplant, in a bid to broadcast, the mulch will protect your seeds from making contact with the soil. So what is recommended, for example, as you prepare for your irrigation fed or dry season farm, you can nicely move your mulch to the side, broadcast your rice seeds, and then lightly cover. And as the rice grow, if you need to thicken up more, you can go ahead with that. So those are some things to look into. We go on. Soil health and fertility. The conventional agriculture, the continuous use of fertilizer is the only known fertility management process. In conservation agriculture, the soil is treated as an investment. We talked about this yesterday. In conventional agricultural farming, farmers farming year in, year out. This is some area I think we should dwell on. Farmers farming year in, year out, they're not interested in what's going on in the soil. And because they feel, well, the soil is dead, we'll go and buy more fertilizers. And after using the fertilizer, the soil is still dead as it has been dead. The next year, we can buy some more fertilizer. But what conservation agriculture, what climate smart agriculture is teaching us as agronomists, as field agents, is to teach farmers, transfer this knowledge to farmers, is that there is a way you can manage your field. You don't need to sterilize your soil entirely. You don't need to kill your soil entirely. There's a way to manage your field that even your farm activity will not kill the soil, but rather to help it to grow. That's why we're talking about organic waste. We're talking about being sensitive to the kind of chemicals we use, being sensitive to crop rotation, because you're managing your farm such that the entire fertility is not diminished, it's not destroyed. You manage it efficiently such that the soil is seen as an investment. So while chemical fertilizer can quickly provide nutrients to plants, the challenges outweigh the benefits. We shall address this in details tomorrow. The level of diligence a farmer puts, this is one of my favorite quotes to farmers. Let's listen to this. The level of diligence a farmer puts into building his soil health and fertility over years is a key determining factor that governs his extent of productivity. The level of diligence, that's what we should underline. Soil nutrition management should be addressed as a long-term and continuous investment, not a season quick fix. Now, what this means is that as farmers, once we are done with farming this season, we're not interested in that farm again until when next we want to farm next year or the dry season. Now, these things are what are destroying our soil. But as a farmer, when you understand that your soil is an investment, you see farmers go and take during dry season cow dungs and dump it in the farm. They are investing in it. Those cow dungs will decompose in that farm and increase its nutritiousness. They will increase its fertility and its health. We're talking about mulching. Oh, I can't burn my field and expose it to the sun, scorch. I can't cut down all the trees in my field and expose it to erosion. Oh, I have to use fertilizer just the right amount so that I don't make my soil acidic. So farmers need to be trained or taught to understand that the soil is an investment. Remember yesterday we likened the soil to a womb. Anything you give to it, even trash, it turns it to life. And so when farmers understand that their soil is what they can invest in, investment in the soil is year in, year out. One of the things I teach farmers is organic farming. In organic farming, you've been using chemicals on your soil for the past 10, 20 years. You can't wake up one day and say, now I'm an organic farmer and you want to practice organic farming and achieve the same result overnight. It's a process of gradually withdrawing. We'll look at that tomorrow. Gradually withdrawing the chemical and introducing the organic. It's like someone who is a chain smoker. Forgive me, I can use such an example. And you don't want Mr. A to smoke, so you take him for rehab. He goes to rehab and they withdraw him, lock him up in a room, and you don't give him access to any of the things, his substances he's abusing. He goes through what is called a withdrawal period. His body's been used to a particular substance and then you're preventing him from having access to it. It's a serious crisis. And if he's able to pull out of that, he recovers. But there's a more practical approach where it's a phased way of withdrawing. If the man is saying, oh, I smoke 10 packs of cigar in a day, I want to stop smoking, and you ask him, how is it going? He say, look, I smoked just 1 pack today. That's progress. He might not be completely has stopped smoking, But that's progress from 10 to 1, from 10 to 5. And then tomorrow you say, oh, I did just 1 stick last week. It comes to a point where you say, hey, I'm completely done with smoking. It's a process. So our plants are living things. They adapt to what we feed them. Anyone ever heard the word or the phrase, the common phrase, you are what you eat? You know, what we feed our crops with is what they are used to. And mind you, their seeds are genetic imprints of the informations their parents had, just like animals. So plants that have been used to excessive nitrogen, you withdraw nitrogen from them overnight and you want to throw something else on them. They don't know it. So it's a phase, it's a process, and we'll get there. So farmers need to know that investing in the soil is what gives that soil. You know, you travel to a particular farmer's field and you see his soil so dark, so rich, so lush. The earthworm activity there is amazing. The crops are not just tall, they are big. The fruits are heavy, they are weightful. You know, you admire and asking the farmer, what are you doing to your field that my field is different? The man tells you, look, all the cassava peel from my cassava processing plant farms, I bring them here to decompose in my farm. My cow poo, my goat poo, my chicken, I've put like 10 bags of poultry dropping in this farm. That's an investment. You know, on the long term, it saves him the continuous use of chemicals, the continuous use of fertilizers because his soil is healthy. You know, yesterday we talked about the difference between soil health and soil fertility. The ability for a soil to suppress weed is the soil being healthy. The ability for a soil to suppress insect infestation as pests is the soil being healthy. It has not to do with fertility. Because there are some soil, they are so sterile, any disease that come. Yesterday, remember we used the analogy of a HIV patient with an advanced level of HIV. The medical people will tell us their immune system is weak. Soils also have immune system. So it's not every disease that you see in your farm that is in the soil is what is expressed. Yesterday, I talked to us about ginger farmers in Kaduna. This disease has been in the soil all these years. I mean, they say a gram of soil contains billions of microorganisms. You know, so those microorganisms have been there, but they've not been expressing a disease form to these crops because the environment, the health of the soil is high and the plants can fight it off. It's a whole network communication between the soil roots, the microorganisms in the soil, you know, and the entire protective system of the soil and the plants communicating to ward off disease and infection. Some crops, there is a disease pest, like if you realize flower armyworms, some maize can ward them off. They eat it, but the maize will still grow and fruit and do really well. Some, you touch it, it's gone. You know, my last training, I was asking all the question, has everyone noticed the difference between maize when they were young? You know, as children, we go to the farm, we pick up maize sticks and we chew them because they look like rake. And it used to be bitter, really bitter. Right now, maize stock is becoming sweet. You know, that's another topic we talk someday. And these are why you see these worms are beginning to find maize really interesting to chew on. Because last 60 years, there were no foul army worms ravaging maize across Nigeria or Africa. Something is happening somewhere. And so we'll continue. Conservation agriculture leads to reduced dependence. You know, it leads to reduce the dependence on synthetic inputs. The resultantly, soil health is increased, soil cover and productivity is also improved. There are many natural ways to improve soil health and fertility. We've been hammering on this. You know, a lot of farmers don't know their natural ways to increase fertility of their soil. All they know is go to the market and dump fertilizers there. And we're realizing year in, year out that these fertilizers, they have their side effects. You know, they have their side effects. Composting and manuring are key options. As commonly observed, farmers produce lots of organic waste. We talked about this from fields, from harvest, from animal husbandry, human activities. So organic waste matter can be introduced in the field. Our farmers in this part of the world don't lack them. I was traveling through Benue and I saw farmers burning cassava peel. Said it's piling up. They're burning it. That's a lot of organic waste. When you drive through rice mills, you see a lot of ash from rice chaff, the rice bran that have been processed, or you see a lot of chaff piled up. That's a lot of organic waste. We need to begin to look inward. How do we turn these things into resources we can use? And they're lying there because we don't know what to do with them. Worst case scenario, if it's too much, we burn them. We burn them. I challenge us to look inward. I challenge us to look at these materials and realize they are very resourceful things we can continue to use, either as source of heat, because if you walk through some of those rice chaff when they are burning them, it's so hot. How come no one is thinking how we can make briquettes out of them to for coal and cook with them? No one is thinking how we can partially decompose them and come up with menu from them, how we can use them to produce ethanol. Very simple technologies. They're already being done in India and a number of other African countries. We've seen them in Rwanda and the likes. We can do them too in Nigeria. So I challenge us, let's look inward. We have a lot of resources around us. We are so blessed as a nation. We don't know what to do with the resources around us. Those cassava peels might not be unique to the north, but that's a lot of food for pigs. And at the time the pig process it, that's a lot of manure already straight to the farm. Cows too. How come we're not thinking that we were burning them? So such organic waste matters can be introduced into the soil. If we really want to be serious about climate smart agriculture, the simple truth is we need to look inward, because the resources to make those smart decisions are available with us. We don't need to travel far to get them. Farmers are currently harvesting sorghum. We're currently harvesting millet and a number of other cereal crops. What do we do with the waste? We burn them, we throw them away, we pile them up. They are very resourceful things. So look at that. The use of certain plant, which is another key area we need to look at. The last point, using plants to increase soil fertility. Wow. Look at that and see how it works. And so our hope as climate smart agronomists is to move from the picture in my screen is on the left side of me here, the man squatting. See what's happening there is common sight in Nigeria, it's common sight all over. And this field looking here did not drop from heaven. Someone has invested in his field. And look at this maize, so lovely. I mean, it's just so beautiful. This other man frustrated here. Two things, either he has invested wrongly in his field or he has not invested at all. And it's not really about whether he has put fertilizer or not. It's remember, you are what you eat. It's what the soil has that is giving back. It might be the wrong seeds. We'll look at that. The key decision in climate smart agriculture is the ability to use the right inputs. Your soil is fertile and using the wrong seeds. It's another challenge. So we hope to move from this man, being frustrated with his crops dying, to this field here that is so lush and admirable, and it's doable. It's doable. Look, the pyramids, the famous pyramids of Kano we hear of, that time farmers didn't even know so much about fertilizers. Come Nigerian farmers were able to feed the whole world with granite. And what's happening right now? We will find out that is our soil. So understanding plant nutrient needs. There's a diagram here that talks about the nutrients plant needs. You realize that it goes beyond fertilizer. There is light here. There's carbon dioxide. Remember, that's what the plants take to give us oxygen and water. Plants need water, the right amount of water. The soil structure, we talked about it yesterday. The soil is rocky, thorny. The soil is compact. The seed roots can't go deep enough to have access to nutrients. The soil has a high pH. The soil has high acidity content. The soil is too muddy and watery. So you now look at nutrients. There's the macro and micronutrients, which we talked about. We're getting there. The key nutrients plant needs, the N, the P, and the K. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the key nutrients every plant needs. They say human beings can go for weeks without food, but they can't go more than that a day without water. Some can try 2-3 days without water, but if you try anything less more than that, a serious crisis. But you can go without food. People have gone for months without food. But water, you don't try. So you see, plants, there are key nutrients plant needs. There are numerous nutrient needs by plants, but the three main nutrients include nitrogen. Nitrogens are essentially for apical developments, that's the leaves, apical differentiations. Remember your meiosis and mitosis differentiation, which is what leads to growth at the epic meristem, the tip of the crop. And that's why when farmers go to the field, they look and everywhere is green. They'll say, oh, my crops are doing well. But you realize it's not enough for crops to be green. There are other things needed. So nitrogen essentially is for leaf development and growth. And phosphorus is essentially needed for root. So as oxygen, nitrogen is handling the growth upward, phosphorus is handling the growth downward. So you see, it's an upward and downward development. These two nutrients are key for that. So nitrogen deals with the leaves. Phosphorus, when you think of phosphorus, you think about the roots. And mind you, the roots is where the plants are able to access nutrients from and pass it to the whole plant. So if we're only dealing with the growth up, there's a picture I saw on the internet that spoke volumes to me of a plant that was looking so small up, but beneath the roots were so rich. I look for that picture and maybe share it with us. It's like a groundnut shrub, looking so small up. So what people saw up was small. It's like the ice, floating ice. What you see, as the English would say, the tips of the iceberg, is just the tip. Below might be a massive mound of ice, but because you see just the tip, you don't appreciate it much. So as farmers, sometimes those are some of the things we do and make mistakes. We see the crop growing so tall outside, looking so green outside, but beneath it has no root, it has no base, it has no foundation. Any small thing can shake it. Any small disease can clear it up. But there's a crop that equally is balanced below and is balanced beneath. So 3 Ghosts talks about potassium. Essentially, potassium talks about cellular development, where the main engine of the plant is, where the main activities are taking place. So as climate smart agronomists, let's find out how can we identify, with no so much technology, our plant nutrient needs, our plant nutrient deficiencies. Anyone remember, thank God for these days, we've gone past those times. Anyone remember Kwashoko? When you go to the village and you see a child, he's eating every day, but he doesn't seem to be growing. He's eating every day. The only thing growing in him is his stomach and his head. And then science helped us to understand that, look, it's not good enough to be eating carbohydrate-loaded food every day. There are other nutrients that you need. And because you are eating only carbohydrate, you're developing a deficiency. So this same thing happened to our crops. This field is a rice field. It's not so clear, but it clearly reflects two things. To the far left is green, to the far right is green, but the strip in front is pale, is yellow. Every farmer knows this. The moment they see their field and they see it's turning yellow, they say no nutrient. Some will say it's urea. Go and put urea. But as we go forward, we realize that just seeing a farm yellow is not sufficient to diagnose the absence of urea. Anyone remember Nigerians going to the pharmacy to buy drugs because they have headache or feeling feverish? They just self-diagnose themselves. So how do you make the key decision? You can transfer this knowledge to farmers too, and you can learn it for yourself and also impact your environment. So nitrogen is essential for growth and development. How do we identify nitrogen deficiencies in our crops? Leaves show clear pale yellowish coloration as shown in this picture, particularly young leaves, not the older ones, because it could be that the leaves are old and dying off. Just the young ones beginning to come out, and it's coming looking pale and yellow. Something is wrong. So healthy plants should be firm and fully lush green. So how do you add nitrogen to your soil? Of course, yesterday we talked about chicken and goat manure being containing the highest of nitrogen. Of course, there is beginning to be knowledge in cow rabbit pee, but how many rabbit farmers do we have, and how much of rabbit pee can you have access to? So of course, conventionally, the options we have is either our chicken or goat or cow manure, or essentially we talked earlier about co-cropping and bringing in legumes to our fields to fix nitrogen, or crop rotation. Then the most mainstream option, the most available option, the most effective option, which is nitrogen in the form of urea. Indorama, Notore, recently Dangote, a number of other companies coming. So nitrogen. Nitrogen on its own is not bad. It's one of the greatest nutrients plants need. Ability to manage the quantity farmers use is where the challenge is. Excessive nitrogen use is highly, highly detrimental to crops. Anyone seen what's on the picture on the left? If you realize when you go around farms in Nigeria, particularly around dry season when crops are still young, the Purple, pink colors on maize is a very common sight. I used to think as a young person that these are varieties of maize. They just look purple. It took my growing up to go to school to realize that this is a clear indication that your crops lack phosphorus. And it's very self-diagnosing. It never lies. It never lies. It's very common during dry season because phosphorus, the dissolution rate, is high, is low during dry season farming. Crops can access them. And Nigerian soil or most of sub-Saharan African soil is highly, highly deficient in phosphorus. And because we only find access to phosphorus in commercial fertilizers, concentration is very low in a lot of fertilizers. Forget if they tell you 20-10-10, it's very low because it's an expensive nutrient. It's a rock form mineral and it's expensive to mine. So it's highly mined. So how can we supplement them from around us? Let's find out. In maize and rice production, deficiencies in phosphorus interferes with pollination and kernel field. If you had farmers who farm and their rice is full of chaff, when you do a small viability test, all the rice rise up to the water. Very few kernel have field in there. Of course, there are insects who suck up the milk from these seeds, but largely it's phosphorus deficiency. So yes, ears may be small and often twisted is another way to identify them. Good thing about this training is you have pictures that can guide you. As a climate smart agronomist, when you visit a farmer you are training, when you visit farm communities, these are simple pictures you can use to teach them. When you see this is what is lacking. Don't bother if you've bought NPK 10-10 or 15-15. Obviously, this is what's going on, and you make the right decision. Sometimes you might have nitrogen, but phosphorus is lacking. How do we deal with that? So how to identify phosphorus deficiency. Growth and development is slow. Leaves show a clear red, purple, pink-like color as shown in the screen clearly. Most such soils are highly acidic. We'll talk about soil pH and acidity. And liken it to when a woman cooks it mustn't only be women. Anybody cooks a very sweet food, but the food is so salty. You can't eat it. Such a lovely egusi soup, but I can't eat it. So how do we deal with that? We'll come to that. So when the soil is highly acidic, it's not that the nutrients are not there like the sweet food, not that the food is not before me, not that there's no food in the house, but we mistakenly put a lot of salt, so I can't eat it. So that's what happens to these plants. The nutrient is there, but they can't access it because it's acidic. So how to add phosphorus to the soil? Most of Nigerian soils are poor in phosphorus. It's challenging to find organic phosphorus sources. We talked about this. They are found in blood, animal urine, and in bones. Anyone gone to abattoir and seen a lot of people come to gather bones, and you're wondering what they are gathering these bones from. We are blessed with animal bones in the north, animal horn, cow skull. These are source of phosphorus. All you need to do is burn them, turn them to ash, and spread them in your field. Anyone gone to the village and see women sprayed ash to their vegetables? They are applying phosphorus, So we talked about soil test, which is very key to make a decision on what right nutrients to apply, not just go to the shelf, the market and buy fertilizers and broadcast. You might buy NPK when what you are looking for is not even what your soil is lacking is neither NP nor K. So we look at all that. So finally, potassium. Potassium is essential for proper food formation. People who are vegetable farmers know this. If you're into greenhouse farming like me, if you want to have, very big vegetables, if you want to have vegetables that have high resistance to disease, you want vegetables that are very shiny and lush, you have to invest in potassium. You have to invest in potassium, and not just vegetables, even your grains. If you need very good, robust, firm, big corn cobs, you have to invest in potassium. Maize plants leaves become brittle. Sorry, we're using maize and rice, not because we're limited to other options, but these are some of the key crops we're looking at. We can look at other key charts for identifying other crops, deficiency in other crops, but essentially it's about the same thing. You realize the difference between the picture we're seeing here and that for urea deficiency. We'll look at the picture chart shortly so that you can differentiate which is potassium, which is phosphorus, which is nitrogen. We'll come here and we'll see that. See, there's a picture chart here that shows us a clear deficiency in the leaves of our maize as well as rice. So if you look here, you realize that the dryness and the yellowing is more on the veins of the leaf. It's not the entire leaf. It's not on the outside like that of potassium calcium and the rest. For potassium, it's just on the center of the vein where the major water distribution for the leaf goes through. So it says maize plants leaves become brittle and leaves become, yellow at the center. So fruits don't form properly in such situations. How do we add potassium to our soil? We talked about goat, we look at chicken and cow manure. It's very rich in potassium. Then we look at wood ash, which we have a lot of access to. All you need to do is visit a bakery. They pile up a lot of wood ash. And I don't know, except if I'm wrong, I might be wrong. A lot of bakeries, a lot of charcoal making. These days, they are talking a lot about activated charcoal. Anyone ever heard about that as a form of nutrient? We have a lot of wood, access to wood ash. Just go to a bakery and see ash piled up. No one is using it. No one is using it. All you need to do is go get them. It has a lot of potassium in it. If you really want to succeed in vegetable farming, your field has to be loaded with wood ash. Of course, not ash from coal, industrial coal. That one is poisonous. It's poisonous. There's a plant called comfrey. Spelling is there on the screen, Comfrey. I encourage us to go and research it. It's a very common plant around us. Comfrey. The plant is so rich in potassium, so rich in potassium. All you need to do is intersperse it in your field. It will naturally fix potassium for you. This is something we are developing and practicing, and I can guarantee you it's very effective. Comfrey, please look it up. It's very widespread in Nigeria. It's nothing you need to go far to import. It might be in your backyard, it's just that you don't know the value, so you cut it or burn it with herbicides. We look at another important plant as we go called Clotolaria. I'm sure some of us have heard of it. It's a poisonous plant. It's not edible, but it has a very high nitrogen fixing ability, way, way more than any legume you know. This picture, I'll leave it on the WhatsApp group because it's a guide we will look at. Developing a guide to that for field agronomists to look at, like a flashcard. You can look at it and say, oh, give me a minute. This disease in your crop looks like something, but I'm not sure. Let me not assume. You go to the guide and consult it. Say, oh, this is a bacterial wilt. This is the right treatment. You could prescribe right away like a pharmacist to your farmer, and no assumption. He treats it and the response is there. Oh, this your leaf looks like it's calcium deficiency. I'm not sure. Let me consult it. You consult. There are also apps we're developing will give you all access to these things as they come, so that you, as you're in the field, you can, like a pharmacist or a doctor, properly diagnose what farmers are struggling with, and you can tell them the right decision to make. So just a summary of what we'll be talking about is there on the screen. Say the first one is an example of a healthy leaves. It says it shines, it has a rich dark green color and adequately fed. The second one, remember the purple pink-like color, it's a shortage for phosphate. Phosphorus is short there. Then, the next one talks of potash. Remember, we just talked about nitrogen. Did you see that clear difference? It's different between the absence of potash and nitrogen. The diagnostic features are different. Then look at that for magnesium. It's on every vein. The common one we know, drought. The stomatas are folded for drought. I'm on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm on the sixth one. Drought. When you go to the farm and your maize fields are leaves are folded, it's you don't need any equipment to tell you as a farmer that you need to water your maize. Not the one you keep watering every day and the farm is full of water and the maize is sitting in water and there are fungal infection and struggling. But as a farmer, you should be able to tell when it's the right time to water. And so we need to teach farmers these things. There's a disease, if there's a disease, it's just patches of gray. It's not that the entire leaves are gray. It looks healthy, but there are patches of brown, of yellow. Something is wrong. Then there's a chemical bond there. Every farmer knows that when you are spraying 2,4-D and you use a concentrated concentration in your field, in your maize or in your rice farm, you see the farm goes through shock. Do you know Your maize or your rice mustn't and shouldn't go through the shock when you apply 2,4-D. The reason they go through those shocks is because farmers overdose. It's common knowledge in Nigeria that farmers will say, oh, well, the maize or rice will go through shock for 2 weeks. They're losing 2 weeks of your production time. It's not normal. They shouldn't go through that shock. That's the whole point of the technology. If your maize or rice is going through shock after spraying 2,4-D, it's because you've overdosed. And if you use the proper required concentration, you shouldn't go through shock. So we continue. We'll come back to this. I will put it on the group. It's a very important information that it says guides to nitrogen deficiency and other nutrient deficiency, common staples. So I think we should familiarize ourselves with this guide, come to a point where we can see crops and identify what disease or what deficiency they are manifesting. I think is important. If we ever have an exam, this is a place we should examine ourselves. Train yourself to a point where you can. They flash you a leaf and you tell what deficiency it's supposed or is representing. That would be a very powerful oral exam. So you flash me, I will say, oh, that's nitrogen deficiency. Oh, this potassium. That's a disease. It's not nutrient. Okay. We're at soil acidity. Very important. Anyone see this picture here? You realize the maize is very lush. Give the picture is not very clear. But anyone realize the maize is not, it's not that they have any disease or that they are not doing well. In fact, the maize behind is looking so lush. But what's happening to this patch of this land? Why are the maize here struggling? This is what I was explaining. The food is available for the crops. The water is there. The nutrient is there, but it's too salty. They can't access it, so they are struggling. They're struggling. They're struggling. So soil acidity can influence plant growth and development. Soil acidity limits plant access to nutrients, because I explained how that happens. A little bit of chemistry to explain this. Remember your anion and cations. When certain liquids or elements exist in certain ionic forms, they cannot react to form productive elements or radicals. It's like you dissolve sugar in water, but the water is so cold. It's so cold. The dissolution rate of the sugar is slow too, because it's not at room temperature. Just little chemistry. So what really happens in the soil when the soil is acidic? Soil is too salty, the plants can't access the nutrient there. And how do we resolve this? We realize in Nigeria, in our fields, a lot of fields are acidic. I can guarantee you we will come to that when we're doing practical, simple soil acidity test. You visit 10 fields, 7 to 8 out of that 10, the soil is acidic. And the farmer has no clue. And what that simply means is the soil is rich, is nutritious, or rather it's very nice food the wife has put before him, but it's too salty, he can't eat it. And so by simply liming, which is the solution, by simply liming your field, you are releasing those nutrients. In other words, liming is like you're diluting that food that your wife put before you that is so sweet. You're diluting it such that maybe you boil rice, she made white rice is too salty, you boil more rice and add no salt at all. So you dilute it so that at least you can eat it, let the rice not go to waste. So when you dilute it, at a point of dilution, you will come when you can't even feel the taste of the salt anymore. That's what liming does. It neutralizes the acidity in the soil. There's a product we've developed. We talked about it yesterday. The center has been using it and introducing it to its farmers. Rich yield organic NPK fertilizer. When we're developing it, one of the things we realize is a lot of Nigerian soils are acidic, and our farmers are not interested in going to do soil tests to find out if their soil is acidic or neutral or basic. So how do we save, kill several birds with one stone? So we decided to start introducing lime to that fertilizer. So essentially, if you are using this fertilizer, you don't need to worry yourself about soil acidity, because it's a wet blend of nutrients with lime. So by applying it to your soil, you are liming your soil. You're not just applying fertilizer, you're equally liming your soil. So it's another climate smart innovation. Farmers don't have to go and buy lime separate from buying fertilizer. It saves energy, saves money, saves time. It helps the soil. So we will look at that. So lime, so like a very salty food, excessive and indiscriminate use of synthetic inputs can cause soil acidity. Maize and rice crops grow in acidic soil will be stunted no matter what you do. I explained this already. So as climate smart agronomists, you're encouraged to periodically perform simple soil pH tests to advise farmers. We'll look at these things, how to use test strips, how to use the simple pH gadget to be able to advise farmers. Anyone remember pH scale, from the left to the right and the middle, which is basic, which is acidic, which is neutral. That's what these tests do. It's also when you use the test strips, you should be able to tell from the color change. When you use the gadget, you should be able to tell from the digital reading. The soil is acidic. What do we do? So I talked about rich organic fertilizer containing lime. The manual is there on the group, study it. You see how to use it. Practice use of compost. Farmers who are using a lot of organic compost in their fields will hardly have acidic soils because remember the dilution I talked about for the rice. That's what the organic does. It's sterile, neutral, so it dilutes the acidity of the soil. So embrace integrated plant nutrition management system. We'll talk about it in details tomorrow. That's what the manual is about. Ways we can use our fertilizers, because there is organic fertilizer, there's inorganic fertilizer. Are we saying we should not use organic? It takes time. Are we saying organic fertilizer, we don't get the yields? Chemical fertilizer, we're saying is too harmful. Which one we go do? Now don't confuse us. So the integration there talks about a way to skillfully merge these technologies so that we can maximize their efficiency. That's one of the key topics for tomorrow. Let me not jump ahead of myself. Anyone know these plants in the picture? That's pigeon pea. Pigeon pea. It's a common plant. That's pigeon pea. I hope the picture is clear enough. It's a very important plant. Very, very important. It's edible. Why I like pigeon pea is that it's a highly drought resistant plant. You plant it right now before the end of rains, and you'll be shocked as if someone is watering it every day. You never go in front of it and see it brown. It's always green, and it doesn't need any fertilizer to stay green because it can fix its own nitrogen. So it's an important plant we can use to fix nitrogen in the soil. And it's one of the crops the United Nations is recommending for sub-Saharan Africa to deal with food security, because a gram of it every day in your food, you have enough nitrogen to last you a month. Please, I encourage us to research about these plants. These are drought. The good thing about these plants is they are drought resistant in regions where there are no water. These plants, you don't need to struggle with them. You don't need to spend money to irrigate them. And people are learning about them, so the demand for them is increasing. So there's practices, soil health practices to help protect and replenish the soil. Yesterday, we talked extensively and early today on, green manure, cover cropping. Green manure essentially is to grow crops that you hope to plow back into your soil because they contain nutrients you are looking for. These green manures, they can be plowed back into the soil to increase fertilities. They can be planted just before harvest. Like maize farmers, you're about to harvest your maize, and you don't intend to plant anything until dry season. You can plant plotularia or spread the seeds in your farm. They can fix nitrogen while they cover the soil, just like hay or mulch, until when you're ready for dry season, you cut it down and plow it into the field, and you benefit the nutrient in the leaves and the nutrient they've fixed in the soil. And so they allow cover and protect the land during a fallow period. Weed and pest and disease is equally controlled because they will cover the soil. We talked about soil canopy and plant canopy. So benefits of engaging cover crops are the increased organic matter content in the soil, and nitrogen fixation. We talked about this exhaustively. Weed and pest control, erosion management, very key. There are several types of erosion. Sometimes all we know is the water and flood erosion. There's wind erosion, which is very common in the north. Wind erosion, soil particles that move from place to place. That's nutrient being moved away. That's soil structure being destroyed. And soil microorganism activities are encouraged and can serve as feedstocks for our plants. This very plant is also very important as if you are into animal husbandry and you're looking for hay. a nitrogen-rich hay to cut into your roughages or your field. This is clotolaria. I'm sure a lot of us have seen it. It looks like it's just a wild flower. Just we used to play with it as kids, to press it to just burst, pop. We just leave it. Little did we know it's a very important crop. Now, the beautiful thing about clotolaria, please feel free to research, depending on the environment and how it's grown, it can fix over 150 kg of nitrogen per hectare. That's about 3 bags of urea in the Roma. That's how important this plant is. And we see them in our field, we cut them down, we spray chemicals on them. So it's a very important plant. I like to encourage us to look into. Independently research on it on your own. But the practice to enjoy this nitrogen fixation from clotolaria is simple. If your field is going to be fallow, say for example, after harvesting your maize, you don't intend to plant anything this year again. This is one thing to plant and leave the field. You don't need to water it. It's drought resistant. Anywhere you go right now, this plant is looking very green and had a lot of beautiful yellow flowers. No one is watering it. I guarantee you to fix nitrogen. Researchers have shown over 130, 120 to 150 kg nitrogen, organic nitrogen. Nothing beats it at no cost. And you don't need to go to the market to buy the seeds of these crops. If you see them around, all you need to do is collect the seeds. This is the seeding season. When the seed is mature, it disperses, it makes a sound, it breaks. Explosive mechanism of seed dispersal. So you can pick the seeds. If you don't have these seeds or you're not seeing them and you need them, let me know. On my trip to Gombe, I'm sure to bring you some seeds. There are a lot of them in our farms, a lot of them. And so this is a plant you see in your farm, you don't spray chemical on it, you avoid it because you know it's working for you free of charge. Common name is sun hemp. Go online and research about it. Very important plants. So the plants I listed here can be used as cover crops. Pigeon pea, we talked about it. Soybeans, of course, no one wants to go and plant soybeans around here for. But the idea is you're just trying to protect your soil. And while you're protecting it, you don't want to use the nutrient, rather you want to increase it. Common cowpea, the amaranthus. Of course, we talked sun hemp, clotolaria. So I encourage us, let this training help us to think in very sustainable ways. There's a lot of resources we have around us that we can use. If you don't achieve anything from this training, let that spur you to begin to look within you. So I didn't want to bring materials that are too foreign to us. Things around us. This is a very common plant, very common. So we're progressing, almost rounding up. Microdosing, which I've been talking about, an introduction to inoculation. Microdosing is the strategic and precise application of fertilizer. 3 fingers, 3 fingers pinch or cover of swan. Cover of swan, very practical, cover of swan. Someone is saying, is it not too small? That's why it's called microdosing. And so while you are planting, the idea is that you want to provide the start nutrients for your plant because your soil is infertile. And it's so precise that you don't want to broadcast it. So if this is my 2 grains of maize I want to plant, I fill it up to with the right amount of fertilizer and I plant it. So my crops will start their life just the amount of nutrient they need. Just the amount of. If you think the cover of swan planting is stressful, we plant with our hands. So as you plant, just little with your hands to plant. So this is aimed to give plants the optimal and efficient nutrient to grow. Very key climate smart decision. So you don't, and it's very efficient because you realize that you cut largely on the number of fertilizer you need for your field because you are planting your seeds with just the amount of fertilizer they need. When they start, the first 1 month is very key for them. So I shared with us while I was in Gombe earlier. Cereal crops are the first 21 days is very key for them. Same with vegetables. If your crops suffer for the first 21 days, yeah, he's like someone who suffered malnutrition when he or she was small. You have very little to do to correct that, no matter how much nutrient you apply. But if you give them the key startup material they need, it's like a child who has a very firm foundation in mathematics. Growing up becomes easy in maths. But someone who has a struggle in maths, catching up is more work. So microdosing is very key. Now the challenge farmers, from practice, it's not enough to teach them, will tell you is that, oh, it's stressful. How can I be planting with just one cover of swan. We recommended the 2 to 3 finger planting. Or importantly, some farmers have seen practically, they will mix their seeds with little fertilizer. As they fetch the seeds to plant, they fetch fertilizer equal. Then of course, remember earlier we showed the haraka planter. You can mix it as you roll it through, you are planting fertilizer with the seeds. So microdosing increases land degradation, the need for microdosing. It increases land, it reduces it rather. So poor rains, one of the reasons why we are microdosing is the lands are degraded. There are poor rains. So we want to give these plants a proper outstart, a proper start from the beginning, a proper springboard. Rising cost of inputs, you can't afford to waste fertilizer these days. It's so expensive. So it encourages fertilizer use efficiency. Microdosing use over 1/10. Look at that. 1/10 of the amount of fertilizer typically used by conventional approach, where you broadcast it. Not now anymore. And if I don't even know if farmers are still broadcasting, it's an expensive way to waste fertilizer. So microdosing is time consuming, yes, and laborious. We need to stress that, but it's rewarding. So why these things are really appealing to me is that a lot of the farmers, I'm not looking down on farmers, but that's the truth. A lot of the farmers around us are smallholder farmers. People farming few acres, few plots. So if we're complaining that microdosing is a lot of work, well, that's the same stress we go through to plant, because we bend to plant every set of 1 or 2 seeds. So as you plant your okra, you microdose. As you plant your pepper, you microdose. As you plant your onions, plant your tomatoes, you microdose. Plant your rice, you microdose. I've seen farmers doing, I'm sure you've seen it. Farmers broadcast their rice with the first dose of fertilizer. They're giving the rice a soft landing. So as the rice comes, they're looking very healthy. Another important thing I want us to talk about is seed inoculation. I don't think this is new to us, but when you look at legumes, one important thing they have, legumes, the common one, granite, cowpea, common beans, and then soybeans. One of the things that they are able to do is that they form a clear and important symbiotic. Remember yesterday we talked symbiosis, symbiotic relationship with a group of bacteria, the likes of the Azotobacter, Rhizobium, the number of others who are learning. And together they are able to synergetically produce nutrients that benefit each other. Now, because of the excessive climate foolish decisions we'll be making, forgive me to use that word, non-climate smart decisions, our soils have been so sterilized. So the beneficial microorganisms in our soil, as well as the harmful ones, we kill them out. The excessive use of the likes of gramazone, excessive use of the likes of very powerful insecticides that have been banned in Europe. You find them all over in Africa. So the useful and the harmful bacteria, they are all killed. Everything it goes. That's why it's called broad spectrum. You ever go to buy insects, herbicides, and they're telling you it kills everything in that spectrum. And so we are realizing that our soil is sterile in some beneficial microorganisms. That's why the organic farming thing is very important, because these microorganisms exist naturally in our environment. So inoculation basically is we've been able to identify these key microorganisms, concentrate them together in a media, and before you plant your legumes, you apply it as a coat, seed coat. You ever seen where women are making peanuts? They do the mixture of the flour with the sugar, the milk, they throw the seeds of granite inside, and they just shuffle it, and then as it's rubbing against the paste, it rubs it off, and then you plant. That's what my seed inoculation is. And so when you plant, the legumes have the right bacteria to partner with. Mind you, these days there are certain varieties of legumes now that are selected. They don't just bind or partner with any beneficial microbes. They don't just partner with any uh, uh, inoculant. There's a unique and a particular one that they partner with. And so such treatments are helpful. So it's designed to aid legumes to fix nitrogen. So not all seeds or variety of legumes partner or symbiotically function with nitrogen fixing bacteria. There's those that are selective, particularly in soybeans. And that's why as a farmer, farmers want to consult with you as a climate smart agronomist to advise them what variety of soybeans is the best to grow in my region. So I'm from Gombe. what our soils are rich. Can we go and buy this variety from this company? Is it helpful? I say, oh, this variety is selective. This one, it doesn't select. It can bind with any nitrogen fixing bacteria. Simple information, but key to productivity. So an indispensable input for climate smart crop production is quality seeds. So if seeds are at their best and starts out early, overcoming growth and environmental challenging is much better. We talked about this earlier. So it's important that we know these things. I think I'm looking forward to having some of these demonstrations. If you visit for example, soybeans field or groundnut field that was inoculated before planting, you'll be shocked at its performance with no fertilizer, just inoculation. And so essentially, they are not fertilizers on their own. They are like bacteria that have been inhibited and passed with a medium that plants can partner with. So as the root comes out from the seed, its partner is there waiting for him. So life becomes very easy. So just a recap of what we've done. We've been talking nearly 2 hours now. Yesterday, lesson 1, we looked at introduction to conservation agriculture. We talked about climate smart agriculture. We summarized it to be our attempt to move away from the conventional farming approach, the excessive use of chemicals, the excessive use of synthetic approach, and we embrace a more of a natural approach so that we can preserve our environment, so that we can eat more healthy, so that we can have a more sustainable environment. We also talked about common conservation agricultural practices, and we'll be talking about them. We listed them earlier. We talked about soil health practices, which we are currently still talking about, and how to implement conservation agriculture. Anyone remember? And then conservation agricultural, soil health and fertility. And finally, we talked about soil health practices, which is what we've been talking up until the moment we came to this slide. So it's good we take such recaps like this. So because we're humans, we forget easily, we drift off easily. I'm not there with you. I don't know who is sleeping. I don't know who is on the internet doing something else. I'm not on Zoom. It's important that from time to time we recap what we've been learning. Look, let these 3 days not be a waste. If you ever took 2 to 3 hours to sit down and have a meeting like this, let it be worth it. Let it be worth it. At least learn something. And importantly, don't learn something and keep it to yourself. Go out there and begin to talk with farmers. Like I said, they are very simple things that are all around us. The problem is that maybe we've never seen them in the context of our meeting. But today, because we are beginning to see them that way, at least we know that they are useful to us. So at this moment, it's time for us to ask questions. It's time for us to talk about what we've been learning so that I can hear from you. And it's time for us to contribute. So at this moment, I'll leave room for us to talk. Stop sharing my screen at the moment. If there's any need for us to come back to sharing screen, I can always come back. But let's have an interaction, all that we've learned. And feel free to unmute your mic and talk back. It's time to get feedbacks. It's time for you to teach me. Thank you. Christopher.
Hello, Christopher, it's like we did not hear you. Network maybe issue.
Okay, hello.
Yeah, this is better. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I say you made mention of the marketing. You made mention of the macronutrients. And you say that there are three macronutrients like nitrogen, potassium. Then my question is on the micronutrients, which is the molecule significant effect on the plant. Do we produce very well, or we only concentrate on the major element and the key element? That's my question, sir.
Okay. I struggled to hear you through the questions you were asking, but let me respond to the ones I heard. You said I concentrated only on the main nutrients, the N, P, and K, and I didn't talk about the micronutrients. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes. So micronutrients are very important. As a matter of fact, they are equally important as the micronutrients are equally important as the macronutrients. None of them is less significant. If I didn't talk about them, forgive me, it might be a mistake or I skipped it, but they were there on the slides. And the reason why I focused on the reason why I focus on the N, P, and K is because, like I said, they are the key nutrients that plants need. Now, by key here, it doesn't mean that there are no other nutrients plant needs, but those ones are needed, like they say, micro in minute concentrations, but they're equally very important. And as a matter of fact, sometimes when you are looking at nutrient challenges in crops, those are some of the things that might be lacking because farmers focus more on the N, P, and K, and they leave the rest. So just to also add, remember I mentioned the fertilizer, the rich yield fertilizer. One of the formulations decisions we were also looking at is how do we also make available micronutrients with, because when you're looking at NPK, it should be the balanced diet for crops. You don't need to go and look for carbohydrates separate from oil, from proteins, from minerals. How do we have a balanced diet prepared for plants? So that fertilizer equally contains both micro and macro. So the N, the P, and the K are there. There are other macronutrients that are there, but importantly, the micro are also added as concentrates. So yes, you're right. Micronutrients are very key. But one thing we also need to know, plants will do not so well without them, but they will grow. But for you to maximize their full efficiency, their full productivity, yes, they need micronutrients. And some of these nutrients plants can synthesize on their own and fix them by just, by like human beings, we talk about you sit under the sun, your skin can can synthesize vitamin D. So yes, some plants can deal with the biochemistry of these things, but life is easy for them if you can add it. So yes, a lot of commercial fertilizers we find in the market rarely consider micronutrients because they feel the main nutrients plants need is it's the NP and the K. So that's another region. And I also like to point that in Nigeria, except greenhouse farmers and a few other research facilities, you can hardly go to the market and find micronutrients you can buy for your plants. So you want to make key climate smart decisions that if I can't find micronutrients in my crop, then how do I naturally fix them? We talked about certain crops that can do these things. And also, how do I bring manure to my field that will help this? Or how do I use fertilizers that contains micronutrients? Those are some key decisions to also look at. I hope this answers you.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. I'm satisfied, sir.
Excellent. Thank you. Please unmute, ask your questions, unmute, make your contributions. And it's almost 11. I encourage us to ask questions. Questions are the only way we will know that you've learned. Questions are the only ways we will know that you have challenges.
Hello, sir.
Okay, Nathan, go ahead.
Sir, please, in a situation whereby you're supposed to apply your fertilizer and the time has passed, so the plant has shown stunted growth. If you apply the fertilizer, will the fertilizer be effective?
At least you said that the plant has shown stunted. Well, there are stages of fertilizer recovery in plants where the plant hasn't advanced so much. Here, what is important is for you to make economic decisions. I've made a mistake My field has so advanced. As a matter of fact, the maize have started producing grains and crops. If I apply fertilizer at this stage, will this still be helpful? To be honest, anything you do when the deficiency has so advanced, whatever happened, you were not there to address it. You have to make the decision, economic decision, to bear the losses. And the economic decision, if you ask me, would be to allow that field until the next planting season. Whatever you can harvest out of it, you manage. You manage. But if it's in the early stage, you are sensitive to know early enough that this fertilizer applied is fake. This fertilizer applied was washed off. This fertilizer applied, there was no rain, and so the fertilizer didn't work. You need to make the early decision. So I think the solution is the time, the sensitivity to the time to know when to make that decision, when to make that judgment call as a farmer or an extension staff to advising farmers. You know, those pictures I showed us, every farmer goes to his farm at most every day, at most 3 times a week. You can't miss such sensitive decision, particularly in the early days of your farming, early beginning of your farm season. And so being able to look at the leaves, you know, like I said, those pictures very key. Being able to look at the leaves, look at the stems, look at the crops, and identify what's going on is key, you know, to production.
And some more to that, in terms of the fertilizer application, in some literatures, it is advisable that we apply fertilizer 2 weeks after germination. Some literatures 3 weeks after germination. Some even a week and a half after germination. So which one is the appropriate for first dose of fertilizer application? Because some are saying if the plant are tender and you apply fertilizer, it will be toxic, so it will harm the plant. So which time is the appropriate time for fertilizer application?
It depends on the crop. That's the first thing. Number 2, it depends on the soil. Remember when we started this training on soil health, I mentioned that your job as an agronomist or as a field agent is to advise farmers on the importance of soil tests. A farmer who blindly goes into cultivation is the one who will have these challenges you're talking about. And importantly, that's how we farm in this part of the world. Next year, people will clear their field and plant, and they don't know what's the state of the soil. So a farmer who tests his soil before he plants should be able to tell what is lacking and addresses it or prepares to address it. So let's answer this question in the context of Nigeria. Yes, if you've not done your soil analysis and you can't tell that your soil is lacking in so and so nutrient, it's just a general rule of thumb to, for example, if you are planting maize or rice, to do your first application before the end of the first 21 days of planting. The reason is so that your plants can have a soft landing. If you're practicing micro dosing like we talked about, you don't need to do your first application after 21 days, because remember, your grains have been planted with a dose that will be sufficient for them for the first 21 days. So there are a lot of context to answering this question. But in the Nigerian context, if you've not done soil test, you did microdose, ensure you do your first application before the end of 21 days. I think this applies to all crops, this rule of thumb. It's not just legumes or cereals crops.
Understood, sir. Thank you.
More questions, please. Okay, if there are no questions, I will begin to round up this class. I have an activity for us to do. I look forward to response from that before we round up our training tomorrow. Some of that before we start. And the activity is also very simple, like the one we did yesterday. As we go about our activities after this training, I want us to reflect on some of the nutrient challenges, either as farmers, because I know some of us here are farmers, or either as relatives we know who have been farming year in and year out. why do we think Nigerians are suffering very low crop productivity? Because the statistics from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization is saying that Nigeria is one of the countries that consume nitrogen the most. Nitrogen is urea in the Roma, Dangote, Notore. But with all that consumption, United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization reporting that Nigeria is one of the countries with the least yield per hectare. Our maize yield per hectare is less than 2 tons. This can be disputed, I know, but the truth is it's low. In comparison to Brazil, comparison to the US, comparison to China, comparison to Rwanda, they are achieving, some farmers are achieving up to 10 to 9 to 8 tons per hectare. What could be the possible reason? Why are we achieving such low rates of production, yet we are consuming a lot of nitrogen? We're using a lot of urea. It's a very practical question that will require us to just think and also observe some practical mistakes farmers are making. Some we've talked about, some of these questions will prompt you to go and find out. And these yields are not just in our maize, it's not just in our rice. I think Nigerians' yield for rice is increasing, but per hectare is still less than 3 tons. There are some varieties of rice that are supposed, like there is a Faro 44. It's supposed to yield nothing less than 8 minimally to 10 tons per hectare. There's a new Chinese variety of rice in the market that is supposed to yield 10 tons per hectare. Currently, when Nigerians cultivate that same rice, we are achieving 2, 3, 4, 5 yields. People will really try. So I want us to reflect on that. This will help us answer a key question. There has to be something we're doing wrong. That the only crop we are getting nearly high yields per hectare is in beans and groundnut. Of course, Nigeria is the world's largest producer of cowpea, common beans, followed by Niger and neighbor. And you can understand for that because this crop fixes their own nitrogen. And Nigeria we should celebrate that with the world's largest producer of beans, common beans. But we're lagging behind in maize. We are not maize self-sufficient. Soybeans is worse. So this training is supposed to help us deal and address some of these things. So these are the things we'll talk about tomorrow before we commence. We need to find out, why are we having very low yield per hectare in our maize fields, maize in particular, and rice. Okay, if there are no further questions, our meeting comes to an end. We'll conclude tomorrow, same time. I will share the slides to the group. You can follow up from there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, you said what?
I said thank you very much for a wonderful presentation.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, sir.
Welcome. Yeah, I heard in the spirit. Welcome. Yes, please.